The VO Meter, measuring your voiceover progress. Whether you're a veteran voice actor, just starting out, or don't even know how to set a level, we're here to help you avoid the pitfalls along your voiceover path to success. The VO Meter is brought to you by Voice Actor Websites, Studio Bricks, Global Voice Acting Academy, JMC Demos, and Sennheiser. The VO Meter is produced in part using Source Connect, made by source-elements.com. And now, your hosts, Paul Stefano and Sean Daly.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 77 of the VO Meter.
Measuring your voiceover progress. Today we're talking with voice talent and solopreneur Daree Allen Nieves. But before we get to that, it's time for our VO Meter reference levels.
VoiceOver Extra brings you the VO Meter reference levels. Seriously, guys? That's the best you could come up with? Hey, it's your show.
All right, so we've got some big news going on. First of all, for the podcast, we've managed to reach 75,000 history downloads. So pretty excited about that because, as you want to say, you didn't expect download. Now we're up to 75,000, so woohoo!
Absolutely. And I want to thank all of our listeners so much because of the support that you've given us over the years. And it's actually led to a new professional opportunity for me. One of our friends and listeners of the podcast, Monique Sake Bagwell, has actually offered me an adjunct professorship at her university for teaching an Art of the Podcast course this spring. So I could not have gotten this opportunity without your guys' support. So thank you so much.
Yeah, that's amazing. I heard about this from Monique, and I think I actually referred you and said, you should contact Sean. He's perfect for this. And congratulations, man. That's great.
No, it's awesome. It's like I've talked about this before, but I love how my career path has kind of married my loves of education and voice acting and now podcasting. So I'm really looking forward to it. And thank you for Monique for standing by me and being my cheerleader and convincing the rest of the staff at Lander University I was a good fit.
So tell me a little bit about what the duties involve. Obviously, you're teaching a class, but what can you share about it?
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's kind of like some of the recorded modules I've done over the years for GVAA or Rekindle. It's a very kind of hands-off class. There's going to be a lot of pre-recorded content that I distribute to the students. I'll be available for office hours during the week to help them individually if they need it, and then at the end of the course they'll just have to have some kind of overarching project that they finish for me, likely some kind of podcast recording, and then that's it. If they like me, they'll keep asking me to do this stuff, and hopefully other classes in the future. So we'll see how it goes.
It's all online, correct?
It is all online. I don't have to move anywhere. They don't have to move anywhere. And so, like I said, I feel like this is kind of like the perfect evolution of my experience as an educator and one who's used remote services like Zoom and stuff like that for years now.
That's great. This is pretty common for how the online university world looks. I'm not sure how much you've delved into that, but for officially accredited higher learning institutions, this is pretty much how it works. As you know, I used to work for pretty much the biggest company in the world for online education, Laureate Education, and this is how all of our classes work. They set up a syllabus. It's mostly self-driven, which is kind of a surprise to a lot of students. So some students, it's not the best environment for them because they don't realize how much of a self-starter you need to be. But basically, you lay out the syllabus, they do the work, and you're available for questions. And that's pretty much how the online world works, at least in the 21st century.
Awesome. I'm fine with that. I think I'm well suited for it. So
yeah,
that's
great. It's going to be great. So that's fantastic on the career front. Bit of personal news from me. My hernia is all healed. So I've been talking about that for a couple of weeks. I had the surgery 2 weeks ago yesterday, and they found out it was a double hernia. So that was awesome. They said that was a possibility that when they go in and look, often there's more than one. So once they got in there, they found two, and they had consulted me ahead of time and said, if that happens, do you want to have them both done now? And I had a friend who had a horror story where he had said no, and then like 6 weeks later, he had to go back and have the surgery again. So I said, no, just do it. I don't care. Do it all at once while you're in there.
You got two for the price of one.
Yeah. It's like when you hire a plumber and he says, oh, your sewer pipe's broken in addition to your toilet. You want to fix it? Yes. You say yes. So very apropos talking about piping. But yeah, they fixed everything up, and I'm back to work. I did have a couple of a couple of days to a week where I had trouble talking. So one thing I want to mention to our listeners or anyone who's a voice actor or aspiring voice actor, make sure you know everything about the procedure. So I didn't know they were going to intubate me. And it's a little bit on me because I should have done more research on the procedure, I guess. But there was no disclosure about intubation specifically. Not from the doctor, not from the anesthesiologist. They asked me things like, do you have any loose teeth or dentures that need to come out? And I didn't really put two and two together as to why. So, of course, my wife is thinking, what did you think they were going to do, dumbass? Why do you think they were asking if you had false teeth? But
Oh, no.
they didn't actually say the words intubation, which would have set off huge red flags for me because as a voice actor, that can cause serious damage, that tube down your throat. I think for the most part it's long-term, so patients who are bedridden or in comas, it's an issue. But I kind of woke up from the anesthesia and said, why is my throat so scratchy? And they said, oh, that's a tube down your throat, sweetie. And I was like, what? What did you do to me? So not the best way to wake up from a 2-hour procedure. But it seems like I'm okay. I went back to my announcing gig last night at University of Maryland Volleyball. And I'll play some audio from that, by the way, in a couple minutes. But I went back to that gig last night screaming at the top of my lungs, and I seem to be okay today. So all's well that ends well. But word to the wise, make sure you know what procedure you're going in for and exactly what it entails.
And like Paul said, it might take some detective work. For example, if they're going to do comprehensive anesthesia and knock you out completely for something like a hernia surgery, very often they do intubate because that's how they they send it to you through the tube. So, anyways, keep that in mind. We're really glad that you're back, Paul, and shouting at the top of your lungs.
Thank you. So that's my bit of personal news. I understand you might have some as well.
Oh, yes. So you guys have heard me talk about my girlfriend Rachel on the podcast for years now, and I bet you might have been wondering when he's going to shut up and put a ring on it. Well, I did that last week as of the day of this recording. So it's October 21st, and we proposed on Friday, October 15th. So we had just celebrated our 5th year anniversary earlier that week, so I thought it was a good time to let her know I was willing to take the relationship to the next level. So I did, and she said yes.
Yeah, I was going to ask. She said yes, right? That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I was even though I wasn't really concerned about her answer, I was still really nervous because I wanted it to be like you wanted it to be as perfect as it can, right? So
yeah, because it's all downhill from here. And as fully evidence of that, I can say that on the podcast because my wife will never listen to this. No, but seriously.
Unless she gets an anonymous tip. But anyways.
It's fantastic. Each day is longer than the previous. No, I mean, each day is more wonderful than the previous. I've been married for 18 years, so I'm a little more comfortable with making comments like that. But you newlyweds.
It's fine, and you have to be like it's good to be realistic that it's not always going to be perfect and rainbows and sunshine and all that stuff. And I thought very deeply about that. But I'm just like, as I've told a lot of people, I was like, I'll take 98% over any day, right? Like I don't know. So Rachel, if you're listening, I love you, honey. Thank you for saying yes, and I can't wait for the rest of our lives together.
Aww. Half of our audience just swooned.
Indeed.
He's so cute.
It's funny, I had an exchange with some friends of mine, and my friend's like, that's so gross. I loved every minute of it. I was like, well, I am a hopeless romantic. And then my boss at GVA is like, I like to think of you as a hopeful romantic. I was like, oh, you mean like an optimantic? So that's what we're coming up with. I am an optimantic. Don't be a pessimantic, be an optimantic.
Very good. Well, congrats again, and I look forward to hearing about all your many happy returns.
Thank you very much.
So business-wise, what's happening? Anything cool aside from the teaching gig?
Well, lots of teaching things. So, like I said, we just got the wonderful professorship from Lander University. I've been teaching a VO 101 class for Rekindle School out of Seattle, which is another remote learning class I do. And this one's been great. We've got a nice mix of talent. It's a large class. There's 12 people in it, so I have to be a little bit better about time management. But it's been really good. We've covered commercial and animation acting, and I find this all the time, but people tend to, it's always two extremes. They always overact or they don't give you enough energy. So I'm just, the first couple of weeks are just getting people more comfortable and kind of giving them examples of how big they can go, right? Because as we've said on the podcast, as many of our guests have said on the podcast, if you can give me an 11, I know you can do 1 through 10. If you give me a 7, I don't know if you can do 8 through 10, so it makes me a little nervous. But Anyways, but this has all been a really fun story. A really fun class to work with. I've got a lot of motivated students. People have reached out to me during the week with questions and about how to focus their training in their own time, and it's wonderful. I love working with motivated people. So that's happening. And then now, as of this recording, GVAA is also offering a Play to Win with Voice 123, hosted by Natasha Marchevka and Catherine Toll. So they were very kind enough to come and do a webinar through GVAA explaining some of the sort of the optimization for their profiles and the strategies they've developed to do so well on Voice 123 and the other online casting sites. And they gave us we gave them a platform to share it. So that's going on today at 5 p.m., October 21st. And if you missed that, it's okay. The recording is available for people who want to watch it after the fact or want to watch it again. So whether you make it live or watch the recorded thing, you can still participate.
Very cool. Congrats on that.
And then on top of that, I'm still doing my regular e-learning, corporate narration, and whatever other projects I can find. So it's been a busy couple of weeks. So that's been me the last couple of weeks. What have you been up to, Paul?
Couple of cool things. We talked last episode, I think, about how I landed one of the announcing jobs at the University of Maryland, which is a Big Ten athletic school. So I'm doing volleyball there, and we've had a couple of matches. I had to sit out. Unfortunately, there was two right in the middle of my surgery. I thought I was going to try and make it, but way too much pain. And I think we talked about how surprising amount of pain just talking. So when you have a diaphragmatic issue, it's tough to talk. So I had to take a week off. But I went back last night. And I actually have some audio. I think it's from a cell phone that somebody took because it's not one of the official cameras, I can tell. But it's probably the clearest audio I've heard of one of my calls. So this is right after a point for the Terrapins, the University of Maryland. And take a quick listen.
Nice.
Normally what we do for volleyball is just announce the point, and then I usually like to announce if there's what's called a kill, where anytime the ball hits the ground from a offensive player and the defensive team can't finish it. So I announce that, and sometimes blocks, and then usually substitutions. So this was a young lady named Sam Sire, who last night had 20 kills, which is a lot for any length of a match. And this was only 3 sets. They swept the team in 3 sets. So 20 is a lot of kills in 3 sets. So I got kind of excited during that one.
That's awesome. How does that compare to, say, some of the other sports you've announced for?
Well, basketball is a lot more involved because you announce assists. You might announce the specific kind of shot, so whether it's a dunk or a jump shot or a three-pointer. Football, the same way. You're going to announce the kind of play, whether it's a first down, how many yards. So there's generally more stats involved. Basically, you stack them on top of each other. And volleyball is really quick, so they get the point. Somebody serves, they get another point. You don't have a whole lot of time. So in that respect, volleyball is a little bit easier, but it's also harder to keep up because it is so fast-paced. But it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on the gig.
Thank you. And then last week, they also hired me to be the wrestling announcer. So that starts next week. I have no idea what that entails, honestly. I haven't even seen a wrestling match since I was in 8th grade. And I have no idea what the scoring is like, but they promised they'd help me get up to speed. And from some of my colleagues that also do wrestling announcing, they say it's a fun thing to do. So I'm excited to be doing 2 sports for the University of Maryland now.
Awesome. Moving on up.
And a couple other things. I'm still doing e-learning. I just finished a 15-hour project that took me a lot of time. It was basically every day for about a month. I just finished that project for a GMAT preparation company. So that'll be interesting when that comes out. I'll put some links on social media if you can access the videos. And what else? A couple of smaller jobs here and there. And then primarily still working with Twin Flames on author-narrated projects. So I always have a couple of those going on. So that's me right now in VO world.
Yeah, busy. All right, so that pretty much wraps up our VO meter reference levels. We'll be talking with voice talent Daree Nieves in just a few minutes, but before that, a word from our sponsors. Hey everyone, Studio Bricks designs and creates the highest performing portable sound isolation booths. Our professionally perfected acoustics enhances your performance and takes your recordings to their maximum quality from your home studio. Forget about managing noise conflicts with your neighbors and family. Pursue your passion for voiceover on your own time and on your own terms.
As a voice talent, you have to have a website. But what a hassle getting someone to do it for you. And when they finally do, they break or don't look right on mobile devices. They're not built for marketing and SEO. They're expensive. You have limited or no control. And it takes forever to get one built and go live. So what's the best way to get you online in no time? Go to voiceactorwebsites.com. Like our name implies, voiceactorwebsites.com just does websites for voice actors. We believe in creating fast, mobile-friendly, responsive, highly functional designs that are easy to read and easy to use. You have full control. No need to hire someone every time you want to make a change. And our upfront pricing means you know exactly what your costs are ahead of time. You can get your voiceover website going for as little as $700. So if you want your voice actor website without the hassle of complexity and dealing with too many options, go to voiceactorwebsites.com, where your VO website shouldn't be a pain in the you-know-what.
How many times has this happened to you? You're listening to the radio when this commercial comes on, not unlike this one, and this guy starts talking, not unlike myself.
Or maybe it's a woman that starts talking, not unlike myself, and you think to yourself, geez, I could do that.
Well, mister, well, missy, you just got one step closer to realizing your dream as a voiceover artist, because now there's Global Voice Acting Academy. All the tools and straight-from-the-hip, honest information you need to get on a fast track to doing this commercial yourself.
Well, not this one exactly.
Classes, private coaching, webinars, home studio setup, marketing and branding help, members-only benefits like workouts, rate and negotiation advice, practice scripts, and more. All without the kind of hype you're listening to right now. Go ahead, take our jobs from us. We dare you.
Speak for yourself, buddy. I like what I do.
And you will too when you're learning your craft at Global Voice Acting Academy. Find us at globalvoiceacademy.com.
Because you like to have fun.
Walgreens, because it's flu season, and you live in a place with doorknobs and handrails and, people.
We tried booking a vacation rental on one of those other websites. They don't always tell you everything.
The stars take it to the red carpet.
We are back live from the red carpet.
California leads the way for change in America, and so does Kamala Harris.
Rated M for mature. Claire Redfield.
And who exactly are you?
So, yeah, what hashtag should I use to describe a grown man in a tuxedo wrestling a goat?
And prior to 1933, many of them belonged to a variety of political parties that were now outlawed in Germany.
This is the story of how Q got curly. Quinn was crazy about curls. Curly fries, curly straws, curly-haired dogs.
Hey, Jay Michael here. Thanks for listening to the VO Meter podcast. It's one of my favorites. If you're looking for a great demo like the ones you just heard, check out jmcdemos.com for more information.
Hi, everybody. Our guest today is Daree Allen Nieves. She's an award-winning technical writer, certified UX writer, life coach, podcaster, author, and voice actor in Virginia. Her credits include the CDC, the American Heart Association, Stand Up to Cancer, NBC Universal, 23andMe, Live Nation, Huntington Bank, Walmart, and the Ad Council. She's spoken at VO Atlanta, DC Podfest, Afros and Audio Podcast Festival, the Society for Technical Communication, or STC, Society for Human Resource Management, or SHRM, and many others. She also enjoys reading, traveling, and jumping into a line dance or two. Find out more about her work at kickingitwithdaree.com and dareevoiceover.com. How you doing, Daree? It's great to see you.
I'm good. You made me sound so special, Sean. Thank you.
You wrote it. I just read it. What can I say?
And read it so eloquently, I might add.
I know.
Oh,
you guys don't get to hear all the flubs because we cut them out. But anyways, so it's great to have you on the podcast, Daree. Tell us how you got started.
Well, I actually is sort of kind of by accident. I always thought about voiceover, like a lot of us think about doing voiceover and maybe don't know what it's called or whatever, but I sort of started in a weird way. I wrote a few books. I was an author first, like in the 2010s, and I was interviewed on a podcast about the book I think this was 2012. And the host said, "Oh, I love your voice. I want you to do my intro and my outro for this show." And I really had no idea that you could get paid to do that. And I didn't think much of it. Like, even to this day, I haven't done any podcast intros and outros. And I've been podcasting for a long time, but he asked me to do it. I did it for free, didn't know it was a thing, and sent it to him. And then later on, I actually at that time became friends with Gerald Griffith. He's the executive director for VO Atlanta, but at the time he was not, because he wasn't doing anything with voiceover back then. I actually met him at a Toastmasters meeting, and we were both members of that meeting for a few years. And so he ended up doing my author/speaker website for me. And then when he started the voiceover meetups that eventually became VO Atlanta, we talked about it, and I was like, okay, maybe, this is something that I'm interested in, but I'm busy like doing these other things. I think, getting my life coach certification and other stuff. And I just kind of like to focus on one thing at a time. So if you fast forward about 4 years, I went to this conference called Podcast Movement, and it's a pretty big podcast conference now, but back then I think it was like maybe the second or third year. It wasn't super popular back then. And I went to a session with Carrie Olson, and at the time she was, I think, pregnant with her first child, and she was presenting a session about voiceover. And I'm like, ooh, this is real. Like, she was actually like giving the nitty gritty about how you can get started in it. And I'm like, wow, like I was fascinated. But then I went home and I didn't do anything about it then. And then you fast forward like another year, and I was watching a true crime show called Fatal Attraction. And the narrator of the show at that time and to present day is a voice actor named Malika Millette. Her tone is similar to mine. It's mostly the cases that they do on that show are mostly African American. She's African American. I could kind of hear it in her voice, and I said, wow, her tone is very similar to mine. Maybe I can do this thing. And that's when I really, kind of went back to Gerald and started with the VO Atlanta. So that's my kind of roundabout way of how I like kind of touched on it a little bit and then really got into it later.
Wow, sounds like a lot of our stories. There's almost nobody I talk to in VO that says, yeah, I want to do this my entire life. I got my first audition and got an agent the next day. It never works out that way, does it?
No.
So tell us, what are some of your challenges early on?
Well, Sean knows about this firsthand. I was really just trying to get comfortable with myself. I think most of us struggle in the beginning with various things, one of them being getting used to hearing the sound of your own voice, right? Nobody tends to say, like, hearing their voice play back and say, oh, yeah, I sound great, ever. So I was trying to get comfortable with that. And then when I started doing workouts with GVAA, hearing Dave Rosenthal in my head telling me to smile and all the people on the Zoom looking at me. And I'm like, okay, like, stop looking at me. Like, I feel self-conscious, right? But the smiling actually works. So Dave, if you're listening, I get it now. I've been doing great ever since I've been smiling, but it helps that no one's looking at me when I'm doing it. And if I back up even a little bit further before that, I ended up getting an evaluation from another company to GVAA, which I will not name. I have named them before, but I won't name them. And I actually allowed myself to be discouraged by some of the feedback that I got from that evaluation. There were a couple of coaches who specifically told me, like, yeah, you could probably do voiceover, but you really don't have a commercial sound. And the traditional advice that we get when we start is you're going to start, if you are going to do VO, you're going to start with a commercial demo. That's like the way that it usually is. And they're like, you're not commercial. You can't do commercials. And I'm just like, oh, wow. And it wasn't like I necessarily had dreams of doing big commercials per se when I first got into this. My thing is more about narration, but to be told, like, this is like not your lane at all and you can't do this, that's kind of discouraging. And even if I didn't necessarily want to pursue that, like, full force. So I didn't start with a commercial demo. And I actually went for a while, like, letting that voice stay in my head telling me, like, you're not cut out for commercials. And that's actually a lie. I do lots of commercials now. It's like kind of incredible when I think about it. But I had to, like, kind of switch my mindset and learn techniques, of course, and not allow those voices to stay in my head. But it took a while, Sometimes now I will struggle with things like maybe reading a little too fast or controlling my breath. I also sometimes won't try new things. So like you think about different genres you want to do or different like, aspects of certain genres. So for commercials, I think I do okay with most of them, especially when it comes to real person reads. But when it comes to something, say, like spoken word, or poetry, slam poetry, I would think that I'd be able to do okay with that, but not really. Even if I try to mimic, a YouTube reference or something. I'm not, that's something that I would have to work at. So sometimes I won't try new things even when the opportunities are there. But I think all of us, whether we call ourselves newbies or working pros, we all have something that we're working on. So, we're never done learning. We're never done, hopefully we're never done improving ourselves or trying to improve ourselves. So the bottom line that I would say here is you take any advice that you get from people that are more experienced with you, take it with a grain of salt, consider the source, follow your heart and do the work and you will be successful.
It's kind of a double-edged sword though, isn't it though? Because on the one hand, while you were probably discouraged by that advice you got from that company, they weren't trying to steal your money. They didn't try to force you into a commercial demo just because they wanted to collect the Benjamin. So it shows that they had integrity on that end. And sometimes maybe that was the motivation you needed to actually work harder and get to a point where you could land commercial jobs. I know that's been the case for me in certain genres where I've also been told you shouldn't do this, and it just made me want to work harder, and eventually I have done all of those things. So maybe it was motivation and a blessing in disguise, as they say.
Yeah, I don't know. And, it's funny. At first, they wouldn't do a commercial demo with me. And then I got with another coach a couple years later. And she was like, oh, bull, you can do it. And so the company did end up taking my money for a commercial demo later. But initially, it wasn't that. And I did well with just the narration, A lot of people want to kind of, emulate specific genres like commercials and animation and things because those things are more lucrative, they're more fun or whatever. But I think that narration has its place and other genres have their place, and that, you don't have to kind of, downplay one to do another. But yeah, I think that you're right. I definitely had to kind of step up my game and kind of improve some of my weaknesses there.
Brilliant. Well, we're glad you stuck with it because we definitely didn't want you to stop. So, and Daree briefly mentioned it, but she actually started with the GVA membership at its inception. So it's like she was one of our very first members, and it was really cool to kind of see how far you've come and kind of really taken ownership of your own career. It's just awesome.
I didn't know that you guys had just started around that time.
That was the first year of the membership. Like we had been around for a while, but I think it was like 2 or 3 years into GVA's founding, we actually added that as a new service, as a way to try to reach out to more talent.
Well, I am very happy to be one of the pioneers.
Absolutely.
They call that a charter member in most membership organizations.
That's awesome. Yes, she's a founding member. But that's wonderful. So you kind of touched on it in your last response, but I kind of want to go a little bit deeper. Tell us more about what your favorite genres to work in are, maybe why, and what genres you haven't done that you'd like to try more of.
Yeah. So again, I enjoy commercials. I do best with the real person read, but my favorite, of course, is narration. And there's various aspects of narration that you can do: explainers, e-learning, corporate, TV narration. The thing that I want to do the most, which is like I alluded to this when I answered the first question. The main reason I got into this was to do TV and show narration. So again, when I heard Malika, on that show, and I'm kind of amped up right now because I actually just came back from the weekend. I went to a true crime conference. And so I was there talking to people that do documentaries and stuff. And I'm like, listen, I'm a narrator, And they're like, oh, wow, we don't have any female narrators. And I'm like, boom, I'm in there. But that's what I would love to be able to do. I've actually done some spec work for home improvement shows and things like that, but haven't done anything that's actually aired as far as, biographies, nature shows, true crime, anything that would be on maybe Discovery or Nat Geo, something like that, HGTV. So that is what I would love to do. If I could do that, I know it's maybe not as lucrative as some of the other genres that we've talked about, but that would be my dream.
I hear you. And in fact, HGTV has always been one of my dreams as well, mostly so I can just impress my wife because she watches that all day, every day. Maybe someday. So you also host a podcast, as we talked about in the intro, as well as doing VO. Tell us about your podcast and how that started.
Well, 2015 is when I actually started researching podcasting. I actually listened to shows about how to podcast, just like people listen to shows like yours to learn about VO, whether they already do it or not. So Kicking It with Daree started in 2015 after, a couple months before I earned my life coaching certification. And I said to myself, I want to be considered a resource. I want to use my podcast to be able to be a thought leader and to be able to help people and coach them and blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't doing VO back then. So I sort of also used the podcast as a way to see, do I really like, being in a room talking to myself and, can I get over this whole thing with my voice and things like that? I think it's really cool if you aren't doing voiceover yet. Podcasting is a great way to kind of start to get used to it. You have to get, very similar equipment and learn how to do, work with DAWs, editing your own audio and things like that, unless you hire someone. So I think it is a great segue, but that is why I started the podcast. And eventually, maybe like a year ago, is when I really started to incorporate more voiceover topics. But by and large, it's really a personal development podcast. And I started it 6 years ago.
Wow.
So there's people that started before me, but a lot of people are like, wow, that's a long time. But yeah, I love it. And I actually have another podcast with my sister that I do where we talk about a lot of pop culture stuff. It's very different from the other one. One, I'm more buttoned up than the other, but I just think it's fun to be able to, share things. It's a great way to, do content marketing and become well known as a thought leader in whatever your subject matter is. That's why I started it, and that's what I do.
I hear you on the practicing, that we very much used this the same way, I think, when we first started. Not that we weren't already working. Sean was working a little bit more than I was at that point, but it definitely helped us to sharpen our skills for all the other things we do, and totally appreciative of the ability to do that over the years.
Certainly the technical aspects and the production, for sure. So kind of switching gears a little bit, Daree, there's been a lot of talk in VO within the last couple of years about diversity and representation in casting. How has this conversation helped or hurt the business in general, or maybe even your business specifically?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, myself and many of my African-American colleagues that I've spoken with have found that since the whole thing with the George Floyd murder and the riots that occurred a year ago, that our businesses have really flourished like exponentially. It seems like there's more people of color in demand. At least I can speak for African-American voice actors in particular. And I think that conversations definitely help with any subject, having conversations. We don't always come to solutions. We don't always get, 100% agreement on things. We'll continue to debate, but I hope that it would be something that is productive and that's something that will not continue to be divisive, but to kind of encourage more understanding and awareness amongst people. It brings awareness to what my people have always known, but there will continue to be people that just believe that, doesn't really matter. Voice acting is just acting, doesn't matter who does it, which I totally don't agree with. And if I could, I'd like to share a few thoughts about things that I think would help our industry develop more inclusivity.
Yes, please.
These thoughts and suggestions that I'm going to share are just those of myself, I'll say, and many of my colleagues, but I do not speak for all Black voice actors, just so you know. So one thing I can say is when it comes to specs, okay, like the instructions that come with auditions, I think that people in casting may do well to avoid the use of code words. And what I mean are certain kinds of descriptors that are very thinly veiled, everything basically but saying ghetto. So like words like sassy or street, diva, urban. Sometimes people will have on, pay-to-play sites or other things, descriptors about accents, and I don't consider urban to be an accent. You can't have a Black accent because we're not a monolith. We don't all sound the same. You can't have an accent called urban. Urban means that, it's a particular point in a city or a metropolitan area. That's what it means. It doesn't mean what they're trying to make it mean. You can't talk white or talk Black. It's perfectly okay, I think, to ask for actors in your specs who match the demographic of the audience that you're targeting. I mean, that's basic marketing 101. Like, how do we find the people that we want to buy this product, and how do we cater our message and, you know, everything that they see, if it's not a radio ad, to that market? So that makes sense to me. That's one suggestion.
Well, can we take them one at a time?
Mind.
I want to add something too.
Yeah, it's just such a simple solution. Like, if you have a target audience and want to hire someone from that demographic, say that. Just don't make assumptions about the way that person sounds.
Okay, so I want to ask, what in your mind would be an acceptable way to present that? So let's say you want to target 18 to 25-year-old black youth in New York. How would you spec that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're a marketing person, I'm a writer, but I'm not necessarily a copywriter. But I would say, from a marketing aspect, I would look at what is trending with that age group and that demographic. Who are, you know, the singers, rappers, celebrities, influencers that they look up to and that they follow? You know, where are they spending their money? What kind of clothing are they buying? Makeup, jewelry, music? What are they into, right? And then you cater, you know, we see this all the time. You cater those specs with different references, celebrity references. Maybe, you know, for me, I will get something like, we want you to sound like, Viola Davis or Maya Rudolph or, you know, Issa Rae or someone like that. Like, whoever that hot person is at the time, or, you know, relevant to what this is. So use a celebrity reference and it'll be super obvious what you want from us.
Okay.
And that's with anybody, because I mean, that's not just like a black thing. That's like, celebrity references are just like a thing. So that's the way that I would go about it without using all those code words. The other thing, this is even more important than this spec description that I'm giving. I think that we need more diversity in casting, behind the scenes, with creative, with the copywriters and so on. It's sorely lacking, and there's plenty of talent to go around that are people of color. I think when it comes to casting directors and copywriters, for example, it really behooves, you know, ad agencies to recruit folks who are part of the culture that you're marketing to. I have a really, really close friend of mine in this business who did a major ad for a major company that I won't mention, and it was she was told this is specifically targeted for African American women. And then they had a line in there that was like so blatantly like offensive. She's like, there's no way that I can say this and still be credible. But it's not her job to, you know, rewrite the script. It's her job to read it and to act it out. But she was very conflicted about this. You know, she actually called me. I was on vacation. She's like, listen, Daree, I what would you do? Like, should I say something? Like, it really gets to us, because it's like a conundrum. Like, do we speak up? What is going to be the response? And there's no one on the team that's a person of any color. There's no Asians on the team. There's no, people from India. There's no Hispanics. There's no people of color whatsoever on that team. And they're targeting African American women. So it's kind of like, and they're like, okay, well, will you help us? They actually received it well. And they were like, well, will you help us? Can you help us, reword it? What should we say? And now it's getting into, wait a minute, though. I want to help you do the creative correctly, but like, maybe I should charge extra because now I'm a consultant. I'm not just a voice actor. I'm a consultant now. Mm-hmm. And really, this is something that you as the marketing team, as the creative team, you guys need to figure that out. You know what I mean? Like, it's not up to me to give you guys suggestions. I mean, I could if you want to pay me more. That was my position. But, ultimately, she was able to handle it and get through it. And I think they also had a focus group of some sort to, kind of also bounce things off of, because, this business is very subjective. So it is possible that she could have read the line and been offended and no one else was. But we have like a little mastermind group. There's like 5 or 6 of us. And she talked to all of us about this line. And all of us were like, oh, no. I wouldn't read that line either. That line has got to go. It was just one line, but it made the difference when they took it out. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So you really need to have producers, copywriters, directors, casting people that are at least one. You could find somebody. Don't say that there's no one in that group that's available to do that. That is a lie. There are multi-talented people of every color and creed out there. Just get somebody, even if you just want to hire them just for that project, to help you out with the wording, because it really does matter. Because if it's offensive to all of us, what happens when it goes out into the marketplace and there's thousands and millions of people that hear it,
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in America. I mean, you can literally find anyone from any ethnic background and or language in the contiguous U.S., I'm sure.
Yeah, that's how you achieve authenticity and realness in your product and your campaigns, by including the people that you're addressing.
Yeah, it can't just be the end product. It has to be at all stages of production.
So moving on, Daree, what challenges have you had as a woman of color in the entertainment business?
Well, I'm sure you've heard some of this stuff before, but I know for me personally, I will sometimes get direction or feedback about my performance, as we all do, but it asks me to, using some of those code words that I mentioned that you shouldn't use, be more sassy. Why don't you sound more Black? I've actually had like email feedback saying the client would like you to say this word like or like as if I'm like moving my neck and having an attitude. It's just like, okay, like I don't know. I don't really know how they should say that, but it just didn't feel good when I read it. And I wrote back and I was like, could you be more specific? Because it had been a while since I had submitted the first voiceover and I thought everything was fine. And they came back with that one line. But I mean, what does that mean? It's a subjective business. It's sometimes difficult for people to articulate what they want to hear from you and match, what they're envisioning, what they're hearing in their head. But what I like to say, again, going back to that whole thing I mentioned about, we don't have to, there's no such thing as sounding Black or talking white. It's okay if a person, if you see the person's picture on a website or a pay-to-play site or something, it's okay if we look differently from how we sound, in your eyes. Maybe you think that a person that looks like me should sound a certain way, or this is what you want something to sound like. But, we're all different. We're not a monolith. We don't want to do caricatures or, derogatory or demeaning versions of our culture. And that goes for anybody. I would dare say that even people that are not Black probably don't want to get paid or not to perform caricatures or derogatory versions of their culture. I think, again, it's much better to give a character or a celebrity reference as an example of the style that you want to hear. There are many, many of us out here. We have our home studios, we're trained, we're talented, we're available to do the work. So even if my voice isn't what you need, not what you're looking for, I know a whole plethora of people that, I can refer you to. You know what I mean? So again, just don't say that, you can't find someone to represent that, and speaking of the people refer to, one of the things that's really helped provide a great deal of support is the African American Voice Actors Database, the American Voice Actors Facebook group. And these are, put on by Brian Howard. It's a database literally that you can find lots of profiles, just like a casting site. That's where I recommend that you would check for African American voiceovers first. And, that's really all I'm going to say about that, because I feel like I've been on the subject for a while, but I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think that it is important to just kind of consider that, we're not a monolith and we don't want to perform demeaning versions of our culture. And I thank you both for asking this question.
Of course. So if you're listening out there, producers or anyone in a creative business, stop relying on the stereotypes of yesteryear. Treat everyone as individuals.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah. So you've been so generous with your knowledge and the resources that you've been offering, but our show does have a lot of listeners new to the business. What would you suggest to someone just starting out?
Oh, I've got a list for you here too, Sean.
Oh, great. I'm not surprised.
You guys know, okay, I'm a writer. I can't help it. This is what I do. Okay. So, and some of you have heard these things before, so maybe you might want to consider some of these as a refresher. But first thing I would say is listen to different kinds of voiceover. Listen to the kinds of voiceover that you think you want to do. Transcribe a piece or two. Mimic the technique of the voice actor you hear, and then play around and put your own spin on it. Another thing you can do, of course, is to practice and get coaching, because it's one thing to practice by yourself and not have any feedback. You could be practicing wrong. So you definitely want to get with someone that's more experienced and that is successful in the genre that you wish to be successful in. You want to look at the folks who have careers that you want to emulate, that you admire, and see what they did. You also want to consider this when we talk about auditions, and sometimes there's a lot of disappointment. Sometimes people refer to it as rejection, but I always say that it's not necessarily that you were rejected, it's just that you weren't selected. And there actually is a huge difference with that mentality in saying to yourself that I wasn't rejected for this spot or this role, I just wasn't selected. If you think about competition, I think that the healthiest way to look at competition is competing with yourself. Like, how can I improve? What did my audition sound like 6 months ago, a year ago, 3 years ago? And am I improving? Do I sound better? Am I booking more? I think it's great to have some kind of CRM or spreadsheet where you are keeping tabs on, the jobs that you book and, the roles that you book and the auditions that you do, and check the statistics, do a little math and see how you're progressing. If you're not progressing the way you want to, then maybe you want to hire a coach for that or a mentor. I just think we need to strive to improve our own performance rather than kind of looking at necessarily who booked the spot or the gig and saying, oh, well, I sounded better than that. I don't know why they picked them. You know what I mean? And maybe you really do feel that way. I'm not saying that that's totally wrong, but don't get bogged down and depressed about it. Again, as I mentioned earlier about podcasts, listen to podcasts about, just like VO Meter, about the business of VO and other free content. You don't want to just only listen to voiceover podcasts, but you want to, learn from people in diverse areas. Maybe your main thing is animation and that's what you want to do. Go ahead and listen to something about corporate narration. There might be a little nugget in there that you can slip in there for your animation. I don't know. But I think that, having that one track mind sometimes can hurt you. I think sometimes it's good to boost your creativity by going outside of the box a little bit sometimes. So definitely learn from free content as well as, getting that paid coaching, that one-on-one or group coaching. I am a person that does not do voiceover full time. As you heard, I have 12 titles. So I do a lot of things, but I think it's okay to allow yourself to juggle VO with other kinds of work. It informs you, Paul was saying earlier, that most people don't just, come into VO and they just start doing that from the time they leave high school. There are a couple, but most of us don't. And so it's use the other experiences and the work that you have to inform, those roles that you play and the, work that you do with the VO. Because my bio was full of stuff that has nothing to do with VO, And then when you started to incorporate all these things, prepare to do the work. You're an entrepreneur, unless you have, assistants, and you may not have assistants in the beginning. I still don't, but prepare to do the work, prepare to balance your time, especially if you're like me and you have multiple jobs. And then my last tip is to have fun, because VO is fun.
Wow, what a font of information you are, Daree. I had no idea.
Absolutely. No, and she made lists, guys. It's wonderful. So, but I love that so much, especially your note about kind of branching out to genres that you might be less interested in or more even intimidated by. Because nowadays, with all of the content that's out there, I'm thinking particularly instructional e-learning stuff, it's really there's so much genre fusion that's out there. Everything is being gamified, and all the corporate trainings even, there's a level of animation and commercial styles that are being incorporated to what we thought was very dry, uninteresting deliveries. So definitely expand outward. And like I said, don't put all your eggs into one genre, even if it's one that you're extremely passionate about.
Nice one, Biff. You just Biff Tannen from Back to the Future that metaphor. But anyway, Daree, it's been a pleasure to have you today. Thanks for being on the podcast. Where can folks find out more about you if they want to work with you or hire you?
Sure. They can go to DareeVoiceover.com if they want to hire me for VO. I have all my demos there at the top. You don't even have to scroll. They're all above the fold. And if you want to listen to my podcast, you can go to kickingitwithdaree.com.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, guys.
All right. So thanks to Daree. That was a fantastic interview. I apologize for the delay in getting it out, but we were just so busy with all the personal work we had going on, and then all the conferences we were also honored to be part of. So thanks to Daree for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
thank you so much, Daree. It's wonderful getting to know you better. I actually met her in person at VO Atlanta several years ago, and then she quickly became a member of the GVA membership program. So it's amazing to see just how far you've come in not just your voice acting career, but all of your creative pursuits.
Yeah, and speaking of conferences, we are back as the Mid-Atlantic Voiceover Conference, or MAVO, official podcast partners. So that's coming up on November 12th, 13th, and 14th. And we'll be getting you lots of content both before the show with some of the speakers and presenters, and then during the show with some live audio.
Cannot wait. We've got some excellent presenters coming there, and the keynote is actually video game veteran Jennifer Hale. So I'm excited about her alone, let alone all the other great guests. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to this episode of the VO Meter. To follow along, visit us at www.vometer.com.
We'd also love to hear your comments or suggestions for the show. Or if you have a questionable gear purchase, tell us all about it on our Facebook page or on Twitter at the VO Meter.